Hello and welcome to this special presentation on student veterans and NC Strive. I'm Jeff Smith, Director of Military and Veterans Affairs here at UNC TV, and I'm luckily enough joined by some student veterans from right here in North Carolina. Starting off, Corporal Rochelle Hara is with the UNC Asheville and is a Marine veteran as well. In fact, Rochelle is currently serving as the intake coordinator for ABCCM Veteran Services of the Carolinas, as well as the inbound marketing manager for NC Serves Western. Ms. Hara, assists the homeless veteran population and their families in finding suitable housing and employment within 28 counties in North Carolina, so almost a quarter of the state. Wonderful. And your degree that you're seeking is psychology.
Correct.
Thank you so much for being here. Next, Corporal Brett Wilson is at Wake Tech Community College here in the Triangle, and he is a Marine veteran as well, where he was in infantry and security forces. Your degree program from Wake Tech is Associate in Engineering, Associate of Science, and you're going to be going to UNC Charlotte as well and majoring in Motorsports Engineering.
That's correct.
Thanks so much for being here as well. Specialist Tara Fontaine is at Methodist University down in Fayetteville. You're Army Specialist, where you were a signal operator with radio transmissions. And you're now studying computer information technology and also the current president of the Student Veterans of America Methodist chapter. And you're also a mother of two and married to an active duty soldier at Fort Bragg as well.
Yes.
Wonderful. And then finally, Will Beam, U.S. Army veteran from Western North Carolina. He is working on a Master's of Science in Parks, Recreation, Tourism Management at North Carolina State University as well. That is our panel today. We're here to talk about the transitions of going from military into this student life at the universities and community college system. First of all, what was your transition like going into out of the military and into college life?
It was fairly easy for me, I feel like. I actually started my college while I was still active. So I was going to school on active duty, and then once I got out, I just continued it. So it was a little easier for me just because I had sort of gotten into the role of already being a student. And then I did move around a bit, so I kind of transferred through a lot of universities, and that was more difficult, but overall it was good.
Brett, how about yourself?
Overall, it was a pretty smooth transition. I think a lot of people struggle with money whenever they come out. My advice is definitely save money before you get out. I see a lot of people struggle with that. But overall, it was really smooth, and I came out with a plan and immediately went to school, so it was pretty smooth.
Tara, how about you? How was your transition? It was a big transition out, I guess.
Well, for a little bit, when I got out, I wanted to start a family, and after a while, I really wanted to go back in the workforce. So seeing how the economy took a turn, I figured I should try and be more competitive. So I started at community college, and I kind of had issues because I didn't know the different kind of chapters or things that would help pay for college, tuition and everything. So a little bit of hiccups, but eventually I got it and, started going to school.
And Will, how about you?
It was a pretty good transition. I transitioned into school while I was on terminal leave from the Army, so it was kind of back to back, and there was a little, like Brett said, some money hiccups there with when you overlap those two. Some of your GI funding can get confusing, but fortunately NC State's Veteran Office really helped out in making that a pretty easy transition for me.
One thing, Tara, I wanted to ask you about having a family. How does that factor into trying to go back to school as well? Because not all veterans come out or have a family already. You do, and you still have an active duty husband as well. How does that factor into trying to complete a college education?
You just kind of throw everything in the air and hope that it works out in the end, because it's always a constant, either I have kids and my husband, or he's deployed or in training or something. So I had to be creative, either fly a family member with me to fly in with me and help, or I would find daycare, which is another expense that, I try to keep as low as possible, but as safe as possible for my kids. So it's either I have them going to school or camp or anything like that, and during the day, and then when they're at sleep, I just do all the work at night until, that's my only quiet time I have with them.
Is that information readily available for you, though, where to find that type of stuff?
No, I'd say it's a hard, journey looking for the information, because it seems like when you go from different states to state, it's different resources. One state may have a resource that another state does not, and you have to just go and find out for yourself, and it's not really readily available.
Talking about savings is a big issue. Why was it so important to you? You didn't really learn that beforehand, or anyone tell you that beforehand?
It was something I definitely learned by myself. I'm glad I did save the last year, but a mistake that I see a lot of veterans, current military make is they don't save, and I've seen a few actually buy vehicles their last year, which I would minimize as many bills as you possibly can, because again, you never know how your transition will go. For each person, it's different. So definitely save your money. It's extremely important.
Transitions is a big thing, not just because of coming out of the military. You were transitioning between multiple schools, trying
Yes.
to. How did that work with the credits? Did they talk to each other at all?
No. I originally was stationed here in North Carolina, and that's where I began school at, and then I moved back to Oregon. And so there's a big difference in the West Coast to East Coast credits, so not all my credits transferred over, and then I began university over there and decided to move back here. And so I'm kind of making up for what was lost now. I would have already had my degree had I stayed in Oregon, but now because of the way that they transferred over, I have a lot more work to do.
It seems like a daunting task always to try to finish up, but you're almost done now.
Almost, I'm so close.
And you did just finish up, Will. You just finished up your undergraduate, now you're going on to your master's side of things. A lot of people talk about the issues that are going wrong in transition. What do you feel is being done right, at least at NC State with your experience?
So I would say the number one most helpful thing was the veteran space that is relatively new in the last 3 or so years. And being able to walk into an office as soon as you get on campus, and you have a couple support staff there to pretty much answer any questions, like a lounge area where you walk in and you're like, hey, pretty much everyone in this office is a veteran, and it can probably be familiar with what I'm going through. So that's the biggest thing that they're doing right, I would say. But I've had a good experience at NC State, being a student veteran though.
You've had a couple experiences at NC State. What is the difference between when you first went to school, coming out of high school, versus now going back after the military? What was that difference like for you?
Yeah, so when I was 18, I was definitely less focused on what I wanted to do, which after being in the Army, I was more clear on that. And coming back, the biggest thing is probably the discipline and determination for the schoolwork, and getting to class and sitting in the front row of class and treating it like a job instead of just what you do after high school.
So all the other students in the classroom noticed you're front and center and ready to go. Were you looked up to, though, do you feel like, by the younger students that were in the class as well?
In some smaller classes where they did know that I was a veteran, someone asked about different experiences, and it doesn't take long to find out who they're going to volunteer to be the group leader on projects, which can be good, can be bad. It's nice to take a step back sometimes and not be the group leader, but also there is a sense that you're being looked up to as an example of, mainly you're just older in general than most of the students there, but also do have that discipline in class, and they see that.
One final question for the group here is, do you feel that you know now where you want to go? Do you feel like you've been prepared to go now through college and going for a career? Because that's the second transition you're going to need to make next is, okay, what do I do next? Do you feel like that you're ready to go and everything's been ready for you?
Definitely. I feel pretty confident. I got pretty lucky at the job that I have now, and it's kind of the direction that I was wanting to go with my career anyways, and so I'm blessed to have been able to find the job at ABCCM and fit into that community so well. And I have such a calling to help veterans, especially, homeless veterans, and so I definitely feel pretty confident going forward.
And yourself, I know there's a transition coming up now from community college to UNC Charlotte. Do you feel that you're ready to go? What guided you, I guess, to motorsports even?
So it came back as a passion from when I was a kid. I've always been, playing with cars, tinkering with stuff, taking it apart. And, I never thought too much into it. I just thought more of a hobby. And during the military, you have a lot of time to think, especially when you're standing post. And it just dawned on me, is like maybe instead of, just making it a hobby, I'd make it, my full-time job. And my dad was an engineer, so I decided I wanted to do motorsport engineering.
And Tara, how do things line up for you for your next transition as you come out of school eventually? Do you feel like you're ready for that, and has everything been lined up for you? Now, there'll be one less thing on your shoulders. You got parent already and spouse.
Correct. I feel pretty confident finding a job with information technology, since that's what everything is focused on right now. So I have a very wide selection to pick from. So I'm pretty excited for the next step.
Excellent. And Parks, Rec, tourism, it's a great field to be in as well, especially in this state. How do you feel like you were set up for that as well, and everything's ready for you to move on with your career after graduation from your master's eventually?
Yeah, absolutely. I knew I liked being outdoors. I grew up on a farm and hunting and everything, and I was like, maybe I'll be a park ranger when I got out. That's why I went into the field, because I did my undergrad in Parks and Rec as well. So I'm really excited to get to work in outdoors. But NCS use PRTM department from undergrad to grad is fantastic, and I'm really excited to stay there another 2 years.
Well, I appreciate y'all's time on this panel. We're going to actually be able to take a second now and talk to the National Student Veterans of America President and CEO coming up next. Well, we are now joined by the President and CEO of Student Veterans of America, Mr. Jerry Lyon. Thank you so much for being with us here, talking about student veterans. Now, we talked about earlier with the other panel, the transition. What was your transition like?
Sure. So I actually enlisted in the world's finest Navy on August 5th, 2001. So essentially I joined a peacetime military. September 11th occurred actually while I was in basic training in Great Lakes, Illinois. I separated from active duty in 2005, and I actually graduated high school in Orlando, Florida. So I moved back home to where my folks were, and I started doing defense contracting right away and going to community college at night. I think my transition was relatively good, but primarily because I was able to find my own tribe of veterans. As I got out of the Navy, a couple of friends moved in with me. A buddy got back from Afghanistan, moved back in with me. We were all going to community college at night and working full-time jobs, but we had each other, and I think that initial core group of folks together is really what made my transition a little bit smooth. Interestingly, like a lot of veterans, at the beginning of my transition, I'm not sure that I considered myself a veteran. Not really because I wasn't proud of my service. I definitely was. But what we've actually found through research is that a lot of veterans within their first 5 years of transitioning from the military actually don't consider themselves veterans. It's a term that we think of, well, be a veteran when I'm older and, my grandfather's age, wear my campaign ball cap, I'll be a veteran then. And so, if somebody had asked me, I'd surely tell you that I was a veteran, but I'm not sure that right at the beginning I would have. But working full-time was really important because I was on the Montgomery GI Bill, so a little bit different than the post 9/11 GI Bill and now the Forever GI Bill. So I needed to work a full-time job to, be able to pay the bills while I was going to school. So though the GI Bill is generous, it doesn't always cover all the expenses.
You just mentioned the Forever GI Bill.
Sure.
That is one of the projects, now that you've been the president and CEO, SVA, that is one of the projects you were able to be kind of spearheading and be a part of as well. Talk about how that came about and then why it's so important now to have this new version.
Sure thing. So Student Veterans of America was really founded as a grassroots advocacy organization in our very early days to help pass what at the time we were calling the new GI Bill, became the post 9/11 GI Bill. It was actually one of the last pieces of legislation that President George Bush signed into law before he left office. All that to say, any piece of legislation with the benefit of hindsight, you could always look to improve it. And that's really what the Forever GI Bill was all about. So in 2017, we helped to coordinate a national coalition of some 60-plus organizations, very specifically organizations you'd be very familiar with: the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Disabled American Veterans. You're going to look at organizations like the Military Order of the Purple Heart, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, and Student Veterans of America came with groups from higher education and military active duty organizations, family organizations, to help pass a $3.45 billion enhancement, improvement, and expansion of the post 9/11 GI Bill. And key among it was the removal of the delimiting date. So if you separate from active duty after 2013, you actually have your entire life to use the GI Bill. It doesn't expire.
And that was a big thing. I know I had friends when I was in college, they were on the GI Bill. They had to finish within a certain amount of time. All sorts of other restrictions that come along with it in case you miss class or drop a class. You have to be careful on those things. But it's good to have those options now. It's a good improvement. One of the other things that you've had in your successes, I'll say, is how to track the success of veterans going through school. Talk about that program and how to make sure that we're actually doing the right thing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Student Veterans of America has the country's only public-private partnership with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to study not only the efficacy of the GI Bill, but also the outcomes of the post 9/11 era or the contemporary student veteran. So in total, we've been able to study the first 1.854 million individual student veterans to use the GI Bill. Most recently, our research project is called the National Veteran Education Success Tracker, or NVEST for short, and ultimately it helps to sort of derive at the return on investment of the GI Bill to the American people. And that return is very high. The contemporary student veteran is not only succeeding in higher education, but they're thriving in higher education and far outperforming their civilian peers who have never served in the military.
We heard the panelists earlier discussing what they've seen done and some of the things that they've done well and some of the things that have been a problem.
Sure.
How, based on what little bit you have seen, and how is North Carolina kind of comparing to other states when it comes to the transitions into the college life for the service members?
Yeah, so the state of North Carolina is among the highest concentration of student veterans in the country. Don't quote me on this, but I think they're number 5 in the nation. So first off, it's a place that veterans actually want to be. What we've learned over the years in the post 9/11 era of veterans is that veterans tend to do one of two things when they leave the military. They tend to move back home to where they or their significant other is from, or they stay where their last duty station was. North Carolina finds itself home to a lot of active duty installations, and they find themselves actually sending a lot of their young sons and daughters off to the military. So folks are returning here and they're staying here, and I think that that's kind of indicative of the support that you find with the state. In addition, the state university system is finding really unique and innovative ways to try to coordinate among its state system the efforts that they're making on behalf of student veterans. And I think at least what I've seen is that here in North Carolina, nobody makes an assumption as to what to do. They're asking a lot of questions. They're trying to learn from the folks that work with student veterans every single day. And as you've seen with student veterans, they're actually talking to the end user of education here in North Carolina, the student veterans themselves and their family members, to see what they can learn and then hopefully coordinate throughout the entire state.
I know there's a lot of efforts happening still on the national level that you're working on. We look forward to seeing what comes out next as new issues come up, as new obstacles come up. I'm sure you guys will be fighting that as well on the national level.
Always. I mean, it's sort of this forever notion of, you know, as you pass one piece of legislation, there's always something else that comes up. And I think what a lot of people overlook about this sort of DC notion of passing legislation, it's actually the implementation of it. You know, we're working with the VA, also with Congress, to try to make sure that the implementation of Forever GI Bill is something that goes as smooth as possible to ensure that at the end of the day, student veterans and their families that are using VA education benefits receive their payments on time. They're entitled to that, but to also make sure that the robustness of the GI Bill reaches as many veterans and their family members that are qualified to receive the benefit.
Thanks for everything you do, and thank you so much for joining us on this special on student veterans.